Oh, the creepy computer voice. Okay. Recording in progress. All right. So, okay. So I want to also start just with a word of hope to remind us that there is a lot of good that comes from these difficulties with our kids. So number one, struggle leads to growth. Literally, like it helps wire our brains. And secondly, vulnerability leads to connection. So I just have a couple quotes from Brené Brown. Raising children who are hopeful and who have the courage to be vulnerable means stepping back and letting them experience disappointment, deal with conflict, learn to assert themselves, and have the opportunity to fail. And secondly, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. So again, just a bit of hope and encouragement that even though those moments don't feel good, they can feel agonizing, that a lot of good and beautiful things can truly come from those moments, more so than the moments when things are floating along easily. All right. And okay, so before we dive into the brain stuff, I just want to give you a quick overview. We'll do an overview of the brain. And for those of you who are at the PTA meeting, that part will be review. Then we'll dive into the strategies for regulate, relate, and reason. And in that part, we'll go over some scenarios actually, like, okay, this just happened. How might you respond? And I have a few scenarios prepared, but if you would like to share one, if it would be more helpful to you to share one from your own experience, you could be thinking about if you would want to do that. We'll talk briefly about distinguishing when your child is in control and is actually like deciding to throw a fit versus when they're truly out of control. But I'll try to remember to check in with you guys at that point, because if you're like, I can tell, I don't need to talk about that, then we'll just quickly move past that. And then a really important one is strategies for developing your child's brain, their ability to control themselves outside of those high intensity moments. So like throughout the day and the week, so that when the moment comes, they're better capable. And then ideas for teaching your child about their own brain. And lastly, implications for all of this stuff in the long term. So that's my quick overview, so you know what we'll be covering. All right. So in the PTA meeting, I talked about this book, and I'll mention it again tonight a few times, The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Daniel Siegel. He is a neuroscientist and neuropsychologist, and Tina Payne Bryson, and she is a family psychologist. And they wrote this together, and I love it because they have all this family and parent-friendly language, like the upstairs and downstairs brain. So the upstairs brain is the cerebral cortex and all of its various parts, and it's in charge of all of our more sophisticated, higher order processes like thinking, planning, and empathy. And when a child's upstairs brain is working well, she can regulate her emotions, consider consequences, think before acting, and even consider how others feel. And so we see that in action sometimes when we're like so proud of our children and we know that they are capable of these things. The downstairs brain, in contrast, includes the brainstem and limbic system, which are considered to be like the more reptilian or primitive part of the brain that's responsible for basic functions like breathing, blinking, things like that, and for innate reactions and impulses like fight, flight, or freeze, and strong emotions like anger and fear, which are really useful in certain situations. But when a child is in a meltdown or an explosion, what happens is that the brainstem takes over. And when a child is having an experience that is frustrating or disappointing or scary, it can be really overwhelming for them. Those big emotions and bodily sensations too just can flood their system, and the hormones going on in that moment are truly like flooding them to the point that they really can't access the upstairs brain. A popular term for that is called being dysregulated, and it can cause us to become dysregulated too. We're wired as humans to respond to other humans. And so if you've ever noticed that when a child is talking loudly, if you also talk loudly, it gets louder and louder. But if you talk quieter, they get quieter. We kind of mirror each other. So if you've had the experience where your child is in a meltdown or in a rage and you feel like you're about to lose it yourself, just know you're not alone. We're wired to be affected by our kids when they're dysregulated, but it's not helpful. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So I just wanted to share this quote from The Whole Brain Child. The stress hormones flooding his little body mean that virtually no part of his higher brain is fully functioning. As a result, he's literally incapable, momentarily at least, of controlling his body or emotions and of using all of those higher order thinking skills, like considering consequences, solving problems, or considering others' feelings. He's flipped his lid. Excuse me. So why can't they control themselves? If we see them handling themselves well at sometimes, why not in those moments? And so the answer is that their brain isn't fully mature yet. They literally can't, they can't access it in those moments. In those moments, because that part of the brain is still under construction, it is not fully capable of functioning all the time. So in those moments, they're prone to getting trapped downstairs. Like it's like a trap door closing and there's not access to that upstairs brain part. So the first takeaway is that sometimes they can use that part of their brain and sometimes they truly can't. So for me, I shared this at the PTA meeting, that led to a huge increase of compassion that I felt for my son, because it caused me to realize that he's often doing the best he can with the brain that he has right now. I used to get really, really frustrated, embarrassed, depending on where the rage was happening, exasperated, discouraged, like I didn't know what to do. And so this really shifted things for me to realize like he's not being a little demon. He doesn't like it either. He's not enjoying the experience of being out of control. Okay, so because kids can't access their upstairs brain when they're in that meltdown, we have to first help them to regulate, then feel connected to us, and then we can move to engaging their upstairs brain. So this is the 3 R's that a couple of you have already referred to: regulate, relate, and reason. Okay, so if you have your handout that I emailed to you, if you were able to print that, and if not, just grab a piece of scratch paper, it's fine. What I want to do is go through each of the R's and give several examples, and then invite you to take a minute to think about what will work best for your family. You might have other ideas that I haven't included. You might see some that feel like they would be a natural fit for your family and others that just would not. So, but I want you to actually jot it down. The process of writing will help solidify it for you, and it will feel more like you have a plan. So, when we're in the first phase of this, our child has totally flipped their lid. Like we've heard, they might be screaming, they might be slamming doors, they might be unsafe. But so what we're trying to do with regulate is to calm that stress response, to let the body tell the brain, I'm safe now. You can calm down and you can release that trap door. So for the parent, number 1, keep everyone safe. That sometimes means removing the child if necessary. It could also mean simply holding the child, putting your arms around them, all the way around them, but in such a way that their arms can no longer flail or hit. My son has started it recently. So after we've been on a journey with him as well, but he has started, like, he'll just go to a room and close the door. And one night that was the pantry, usually it's his bedroom, but the idea is that he's picked up that he needs to remove himself so that he's not hitting anyone. Number 2 is to help them regulate. So the way you can do that when they're ready to have you near them is to sit or lay close to them, rest your hand on their back, but don't talk. They're not ready to use the language part of their brain yet. So for your child, John mentioned deep breathing. drinking water with a straw. It's actually this, I'm going to mess up the explanation of it, but something about the way that your brain has to concentrate on using a straw can help this process happen more quickly. Chewing, I brought this example to show you guys. You've probably seen these, but it's a necklace with like a chew thing on it. And our son started having trouble last year when school was on WebEx. He just couldn't, I mean, it was just so fidgety sitting there in front of the screen during those class meetings. So he started wearing this around his neck, and then he would just chew on it. And it's meant to be a little chew thing. And it's again, just that body brain connection. So chewing, a weighted blanket, going for a walk, rocking or using a bouncy chair, cuddling with an animal like a pet, holding something warm or cold like a rice or flaxseed pack. So those are several things that can happen for just that calming the body. And when we're thinking about this part, we're hoping that with time, with practice, and as your child matures, the amount of time they would need to regulate will slowly lessen. So let me pause there. Let me first ask what questions you have or comments, and then I'm going to give you, like I said, a couple minutes to jot down on your handout which things might really work for you and go from there. So questions or comments so far?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
We find that Grayson will often walk away or run away or stomp away.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we're always in question as to whether or not it's best to follow or let him come back to the situation to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We've tried both. It
Yeah.
doesn't really seem to matter, but I wonder if there's a better approach.
Yeah, I love that. I love that question. And the first thing that comes to mind to me is having a conversation, the three of you, at a time when he's calm and you guys are all, you're not tired and you have the energy, and just checking in and saying, I've noticed that sometimes when you're upset, you take it upon yourself to walk away. And that is so great, because it means that you don't want to say something you would regret, or that you don't want to fill in the blank with a inappropriate behavior he might have done. So you can acknowledge that he's making the effort, right? And then I would see it as a collaborative conversation where the three of you are saying, where is a good spot for you to go when you're upset? So if that's not already in place, just kind of determining that ahead of time, and then asking him, do you need us with you? Is it best if we wait a couple minutes? Do you want us to wait until you come back? It's really honoring for a kiddo to be asked. My son made himself a cardboard sign with a string on it that he hangs on the door. And one side says something, I can't even remember, but it's like, don't come in, I need to be alone, or I need to calm down. And the other side says, like, you can come in, and he never uses the you can come in side, because he doesn't stop into his room and close the door and put you can come in. So, for some reason, he included that in the creation process. But I think if you guys can have a plan ahead of time with him, that's where I would start.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he doesn't necessarily scamper off to gain or collect himself. It's usually, I hate this family.
Mm-hmm.
I want a new one. And he'll go outside or in the garage. So it's it's pretty intense.
So I think that in that conversation, that proactive one with him, I would just say, you can expect from us, we are always going to talk about it. We're always going to talk about it. What we want to know is, do you want us to wait till you come to us? And that's the signal that you're ready? Or do you want us to come to you? But we're always going to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, you're consistent with that. And then we'll get to that part. That'll be in the reason part about kind of what you might discuss during that. Okay. Do you feel like that answered your question, Kelly, or not? Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay. John?
Sorry. Yeah. Yep. So I guess sometimes with Jasper, it's kind of we'll discuss these strategies beforehand, and
Yeah.
it seems like he's on board,
Mhm.
but then when it actually happens,
Mhm.
it's kind of like it's like a control issue for him. Like, I know we talked about doing this stuff before, but I don't want to do it.
Mhm.
So I think that's like one of the things that we struggle with,
Yeah.
wondering if anybody has any ideas of like, is that when we just, I love that idea of him having a sign where he kind of
Mhm.
flips it around. We've never tried that. So I think I want to do that, but any other suggestions?
I have a thought or two, but I love that you opened it to the group. So I'll see if anyone wants to chime in first. Okay, they're all staying muted, so I take that as a no. I would refer back to that bullet point about don't talk, right? So if he is that upset and you're trying to remind him of what he should be doing, it's probably just going to enrage him further, right? And it makes sense that you want to do that because you're a logical, fully developed adult human, and so you want to use reason, because if he would just see the reason, then this whole situation could be put to rest, but he can't do it. So I would suggest that you think ahead of time how you're going to respond in that moment for yourself, and kind of almost script it out. Something like, I'll talk to you when you're calm. That is it. That's all you say. I'll talk to you when you're calm.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you when you're calm. Hi, G-Man. I'll talk to you.
He does have his pajama bottoms on. He's not naked.
Victory. I'll never forget last year when I was a special ed teacher, I was on a meeting and one of my kids started coming in the screen with his underwear, and he was just in his underwear. And I was like, you can't. Like, oh my gosh. The crazy times of distance learning. Anyway, so just don't engage with his yelling. I'll talk to you, stay calm. I'll talk to you when you're calm. And then you could think about if you were going to give him choices in that moment. It might, so for example, you could say, you can stay with me and calm down, or you can go to your room and calm down. Okay. I won't talk to you until you're calm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And sometimes sometimes having a visual can help. So this is something this is well worn. I can send you guys the PDF of this if you want. It's a calming strategies book. It's okay. It's not like amazing, but it has been helpful because I don't have to talk to my kid in the moment. I can just like hand it to him. So it has things like take a drink of water, read a book, stretch your body. I love that one because it's the body. And then it has some blank spaces where you guys could create your own ahead of time. One time, speaking of the body, one time I ended up jumping on the trampoline with my kid, and it was just like, that is amazing. Like how that physical, so physical, he was able to regulate quickly. So like that would be one we could have added. We never did that add part, but count to 10, squeeze a ball, draw, do a puzzle. So what I like about this is that it's a booklet and that it was free. What I don't like is that it has like do a puzzle, because when you're dysregulated, you're just gonna like throw a puzzle, so, and then deep breaths and hug a stuffed animal. So whether it was a booklet or whether a little paper that you had on the wall, or they could just see it visually, and you could even practice. Again, I'm just going to offer you lots of ideas tonight, and some of them will land and some of them won't, but you could even practice like having them point to I'm going to hug a stuffy, or point to I'm going to jump on the trampoline for 5 minutes, or point to I'm going to get a drink of water, whatever it is. Yeah. But again, just to repeat, like I'll talk to you when you're calm.
Great.
Okay.
Very helpful. Thank
Yeah. Checking in. Did people feel like they have, you can jump on and say something or thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Do you feel like you have something? This is the regulate one is the one that you guys were most like, oh my gosh, I need help with this. How are we doing with feeling like you're getting some ideas for in that moment of regulating? Be honest. How are we doing? What's going through your minds? Alyssa?
I think for us, it's more unlike what you said to Kelly about talking to the kids beforehand,
Mhm.
when everything is calm. For us, it's kind of like that in the moment game time decision, what's right. And I
Mhm.
have two very different, the boys are completely different personalities. One's extremely sensitive, just goes off by himself,
Mhm.
doesn't want to talk about things at that moment at all. He needs a lot of time to process. And then Owen, our middle one, he's more reactive in the moment. In fact, I just heard him screaming, slam the gate, and stomp up the stairs. And for the kids, it's just identifying like in that moment, because obviously what he just did, I can hear my husband getting frustrated and more upset. It's like you don't want to react at that, but you don't want to let him get away with that. And then, I don't know, just trying to, in the moment, figuring out what's the best course of action.
Yeah. I think like I'll probably be a broken record, but in the moment, don't worry about the letting him get away with it. You're not going to let them get away with it, but you're going to address it once they're calm. Your job is to stay calm so that they can calm down more quickly. The more frustrated and amped up you get, the longer this whole thing is going to take. And you're modeling to them that you have difficulty staying calm yourself. In fact, if you start to get upset, this is for all of us. If you start getting upset, this is the perfect time to model to them, like, you know what? I actually need to take a break right now. I'm going to take a mommy time out. I'm going to step aside. I'll talk to you when I'm calm. Right. So the in the moment decision, I think if we can get to comfortable, and it takes some time, but if we can get comfortable with just being like, this is my child at his worst it's because he's got this limitation. His upstairs brain isn't fully developed. He's acting like a reptile. I'm going to let this pass, and we're going to talk about it when he's calm. And again, we'll get to this with the reason part, but I am all about making amends. So we'll get there, but if he slammed the gate, stomped upstairs, and then little sister is crying because she's upset because he was so loud, it upset her, then I'll be repeating myself when we get to the reason part, but in our family, we always use the question, who did you create a problem for? And how did that create a problem? And then they have to think about it. And then if they don't realize, we might say, well, did you hear that little sister started crying? No. Yeah, you scared her. You were so loud. How do you think she felt? And then the next step in that process is that they do something that will take a bit of time to make amends to whoever they created a problem for. That does a couple of things. One, it holds them accountable. And two, it actually helps with developing that part of the brain. We're always trying to develop that part of the brain more and more so that it can mature, and the amount of time that you're still in this phase of seeing your kids explode like this will shorten. None of the things I'm telling you tonight are going to make this go away, right? It's not going to change overnight, but it will get better. Yeah, Kelly, woohoo! Okay, let's go ahead and move on. We can always come back to this one. All right. Okay, so I keep having to move my Zoom part so I can see my slides. Okay, so relate. We're on to relate. If you can show up as a calm and compassionate parent for your child in the messy, painful moments, it will strengthen your relationship. So this goes back to that first slide about vulnerability and leading to connection. Oh gosh, here we go. All right, so once your child is safe and calming down, there might still be some tears. They might still be struggling to articulate themselves with words, but they're not screaming, they're not hitting, there's definitely been a shift. You want to focus on just attuning to them. And hopefully this is where you can call upon that compassion. Like, this was a miserable experience for your child, not just for you. They feel awful. They probably feel really tired. There's a huge like surge of stress hormones. And then as those settle down, it's like a crash. So you want to remember that and come to them from a standpoint of compassion to attune to them. And some examples of that could be hugging them, holding their hand as you sit next to them, or even holding them in your lap. Validate them with your words and your tone of voice. And I'll give you examples of that. You want to communicate that you care for them and that you're listening. So we're still not jumping straight to, you're going to pay for that, or that wasn't okay. You will get there. I promise you will get there. All of this is laying the groundwork for them to be able to receive it, engage in it, and make use of it. You want to communicate empathy. And here's some examples. I can see this is really hard. You could just stop there, just say that much. That sounds really frustrating. You look like you're feeling angry. And then once you've done those things, they can feel that you care for them. What happened? Tell me just what happened, and just listen. You can ask more questions. Like, they might just say, he wasn't playing the game right, or I'm just so frustrated with him. Okay, well, what happened? What happened next? And then what did you do? Get them to tell you the full story. There's a lot of really cool science I won't go into about how we're wired for stories, and telling stories is part of healing. And there's all kinds of therapy that involves story. But just the process of them telling you their version of the story is helpful for them, and also helps with that relationship piece. Like that, it's helpful for you to know what went through their little brain, and helpful for them to be heard. Okay. I feel like we might be able to move through these a little bit more quickly, but just take 1 minute, maybe chat with your spouse if they're there, and just jot down for yourself on that part of the handout what you would want to use, what would work for your family for relate. Even go as far as to put down, like, what would you want to say? What would come naturally to you? These are my words. What would come naturally for you to say to your child? Okay, I'm going to ask everybody to share one thing they wrote down. So Emily, would you start us off? What could you imagine yourself doing to relate to your child?
I think the hugging, and then also inviting her to tell her story. Like, I think when I'm in that moment, I am imagining what I imagine happening, and what I perceive to happen, which isn't necessarily her reality. So I think inviting her to tell the story would really help her feel heard and validated for what she experienced.
Great. I love that. Melissa?
For me, it's constantly working on validating their feelings. So I think something that I think they would be, sorry, that's my dog, responsive to was, I understand that you're frustrated or upset. And actually slowing down and listening to them rather than being frustrated and kind of playing into their frustration or anger. So that's one thing I think would work for us.
Yeah. Great. John?
Yeah, I think, sometimes we try to jump from regulate right into reason. So I think maybe we need to do a better job of like letting him explain himself without automatically trying to say, well, this is why that's not true, which then just makes him more mad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Kelly or Jojo?
I'd say to validate for sure. I do like that you look like you're feeling angry, and then kind of ask him what happened. Would be more like, why did you get so upset so quickly over something that seems so little, like your sister singing and going off the rails.
Yeah. Oh gosh, you just brought like 3 different examples to mind from my own kids of the little things that they get upset about with each other.
I'm surprised that get over it isn't one that we can say in this circumstance. That's what we want to say a lot of the time.
Well, the best case, which just for some reason doesn't seem to be that often, is when you're both home, so that when the child is doing that, you can say that to each other. You can be like, I just want to tell him to get over it, but not to him, because it is not helpful. You guys, the reason I wanted to offer this workshop is because it's been such a game changer for me personally. My husband was better at this quicker than I was. But I'm just sold on this. I'm so much closer with Desmond in particular because of this. Even just as recently as New Year's, we had all these folks over in our driveway. We had like fire pits going and we were doing this whole thing. And one of the moms really nicely brought these little popper things that the kids got to pop open at New Year's or at whatever. And I thought that it was going to be like confetti, but they had little toys or prizes in them. And Desmond's had nothing inside it. And obviously that was not okay, not fair, end of the world. He stormed into the kitchen and went and just closed himself in the pantry. And, prior to learning this, I would have been infuriated. I would have been embarrassed. That's not how we act. There are people at our house. We are hosting. Get over it. It's not like, look at all the things you got to do today, kid. That kind of feeling. And I just waited for him to come out of the pantry. He sat in my lap like he was 3 when he is 8. And you could just feel his body slowly relaxing. And I just rubbed his back, and then he just started talking, and he was able to rejoin the party calmly rather than staying upset. And so even though we might want to point out to our kids how ridiculous they're being or how they're affecting us, we'll actually get what we want more quickly if we respond in a way that is aligned with how their brains are operating. Yeah. So it's not even just like a touchy-feely approach. It's actually just a more effective approach to helping them calm more quickly. Okay, reason. So once they're really in control, I shared with you these questions already. Who did this create a problem for? How is that a problem? And then some discussion around alternatives to the behavior. Brainstorming together, letting them come up with ideas. This quote right here is directly from the Whole Brain Child book. Daddy and I are pretty good at collaborating. Decide what you think would be fair and then come back and talk to us. Let me know if you need help coming up with a plan. And this was from a scenario where I'm gonna say like a 3 or 4-year-old was having a meltdown at a restaurant. Not so much a meltdown as like had left the table, was standing partway away from the family's table and glaring at the family. And so all the other customers were watching this happen. And when, so there wasn't quite as much need for regulate because he wasn't totally out of control, but he was still behaving inappropriately in a restaurant. And so the mom, just kind of started with relate and put her hand on his back and asked him what was going on. And it was something to do with the food he was being asked to eat. So this was like, let us know. This is why it said, decide what you think would be fair and come back and talk to us. And I remember from the book that the parents were actually surprised because the plan that the child came up with was like, had a higher level of expectation than they would have expected of him anyway. So like, yeah, that works for us. But the idea is that we have to do two things. Really, we have to make things right. So whoever was affected, Desmond does not like writing. So he has written so many apology notes, so many. Rory really likes writing. So he's doing other things like helping his brother with his chore or helping me. There's Love and Logic, the Love and Logic principles. One of their strategies is called the energy drain. And it's the idea that when a child has made a mistake, that we can say something like, that really drained my energy. Or in other words, like, this created a problem for me. And how can we make this right? It could be like, well, I just spent this time helping you, and now I'm a little bit behind on my not So to make this right with me, you're going to now help me fold the laundry, or you're going to help me set the table. And a cool thing about that is that you use that time not just as like punishment, but like it's reconnecting with your kid. Then as they're sitting there with you folding towels, you're like, so what happened to recess today? It's no longer about the misbehavior. Now it's like we're connecting. So I think the two things are, how can we make this right, and reinforce or discussing the alternatives. Sorry. So this is where we're thinking about like, okay, so, and we'll get to the scenarios in a second, but this is what upset you. This is how you chose to handle it. What were some other options? This probably is going to happen again, or something like it's going to happen again. What are some other options? Okay. Questions about this part? Okay. Yeah, Kelly?
Sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah, good.
Do we provide any praise at this point, or is this just like keeping it? Do we keep it sort of on the same level of, I don't know, conversation versus I'm really proud of you for talking to me, or talking me through that, or talking with me about it, or is there any sort of like high five, go forth? Definitely.
I didn't include that in the bullet points, but it's definitely part of our norm. It's we're like, we'll say things like, I actually do use that a lot. Like on the New Year's Eve example, I told Desmond, it's like, I'm so proud of you that you chose to leave the situation rather than making a scene. I'm proud of you that you came out when you were ready. I'm proud of you for coming up with some ideas, so I think it's good for them to understand that part of the reason this is happening is that their brain is still developing. And so the what they're doing when they're calming down and engaging with you in the reasoning part, that is hard work. That is hard work for them. So to acknowledge that is helpful. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Are you guys ready for scenarios? Do you need a minute for any notes or questions? Or are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay. Okay. So we're going to do this teacher style, which is I do, we do, you do. So we're going to go through a couple scenarios. The first one, I'm just going to share with you a good way of handling it. So that'll be the I do. And then the next one, we'll all kind of bat it around together. And then on the third one, I'll give you some time to just think to yourself, how would you handle it? So, okay. So here we are, we're in the car And we've been at a store, we're heading home now, and the little girl in the back seat is screaming, "I hate you, mommy." And I love this example because this is what we would naturally say, right? That's not okay. Don't say that to me again. But now the child is just more angry. So a more effective line of discussion would be, she says, "I hate you, mommy." This is the relate part. "Wow, you're really mad." "Yeah, I hate you." "Is it because I didn't get you that necklace?" "Yes, and you're so mean." "That necklace wasn't for sale. It's okay if you want to keep feeling upset, but if you would rather, we can be problem solvers and think of another idea." How do we do that? So just this big shift from "that's not okay" to, "oh, and I'm noticing, I'm relating to you. You're mad. I'm asking questions. I'm trying to get the story. And then I'm calmly explaining to you and giving you an opportunity to collaborate and come up with alternatives." Okay. I hope that's helpful to see an example. Now let's do, okay, I have 3 on here. And again, if you have one that you want to be like, "let's do this one, this is from our life," we'll happily do that. So let me just pause there. Does anybody like dying to share a scenario from your own? Nope. Okay.
I have a quick question about the last scenario. Would it be helpful in that moment to ask a question instead of like presuming, like in that I feel like the mom was presuming that that was why she was angry, but like maybe say, you know, "wow, you're really mad. What made you mad?" Or or even get them to maybe identify how they're feeling if it's.
Yeah, I think, I think sometimes like there's probably multiple ways of moving along the same path. So whether she offers it, is it because she has a suspicion, is it because I didn't do this? Or whether she leaves it more broad and says, "you're really mad. What brought this on? What are you mad about?" I think either one could probably be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Because I think, to your point, I think that if she's wrong, the child will just say no.
Yeah. I know.
And then they'll be like, "oh, okay, I was wrong. Then the question is, what did make you mad? I'm lost." Yeah. Okay. So here we have 3. Somebody can pick. So be the first one. You'll get to do your scenario. Your 3-year-old erupts in anger because there are no orange popsicles left in the freezer. You've asked your 5-year-old to stop playing with his toy because it's time to get ready to go. He ignores you. You warn him the toy is going to go away. He ignores you. You take the toy away and he flies into a rage, screaming and hitting you. Or your 6-year-old and 8-year-old are playing a game together. Suddenly the 8-year-old is screaming at her younger sister for not playing right. John.
Can we do the last one? Because this is a constant one, but you just have to replace the 8-year-old with me. Well, actually, no, I'm not the one screaming for not playing right. When we play together, we just had this battle an hour ago, I think, where, these are the rules. If you don't say exactly what I tell you to say, then, that's something that sets him off so much. So does that help anyone else?
Oh yeah. Alyssa's saying, oh yeah. Kids have this phase of development where they're like, it's all about doing things correctly. Not all kids, but a lot of kids are like, this is right and this is wrong and you cannot do it wrong. So I think this is a common experience. Okay, so I'm gonna go way back. Sorry, it's gonna take me just a second. Just so we can see it all on one page. Okay, so the child is screaming, "you're playing it wrong." And we're like a second away from the child flipping the game board. Let's just say it's a board game, and who knows from there. So our first step is regulate. Ideas from the group. What would you do in that moment? I should play the Jeopardy music.
I think one of the things that you suggested before, like, having the sign that he can do, or like cuddling with the stuffy. He loves his stuffed animals, and I can't believe we didn't think of this before, of having him try that to regulate.
Yeah. Great.
This situation actually happened with us as a family, between the boys over the weekend when we were playing a game. And it wasn't about necessarily something being done wrong, but not accepting the fact that the other person did something successfully.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that moment, I don't know if we necessarily handled it, but we all stopped and we just kind of acknowledged the fact, like, have you had fun? Yes. Does everybody win or do the right thing at all times? No. And I mean, I don't think we necessarily handled it the right way, but we just stopped what we were doing, took a step back, and gave that child a choice. Like, you can continue playing with us if you'd like, or we can carry on without you.
Yeah.
And he acknowledged, like, okay, yeah. And we said, how does it make you feel when you're the one who wins? And he said, good. And I said, we just talked about how it's important to share that feeling. So that's one thing that works for us, but it doesn't always.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it sounds like it went really well. It sounds like he was able to move pretty quickly from regulate to reason. Like, he got upset, but he wasn't completely off the rails. What this is reminding me of is a step even before the game is played. My husband is an expert at this, and it's because he's worked in elementary schools for 25 years. But so what he'll do, and I've learned to do because of him, is to anticipate. So before the game begins, or like another example would be wrestling, right? Like wrestling in the living room floor. Before they really get into it, my husband will pause and say, okay, is somebody probably going to get hurt? And they'll be like, yes. Are we going to freak out about it? And they'll be like, no, so he'll be like, okay, we're going to play this. You guys are going to play this board game. If somebody does something wrong, you should probably throw the game board at them, right? Like obviously, like, you shouldn't, because then that really appeals to their, like, no, of course not. And it just kind of sets the tone from the beginning. Like, this is about reminding them from the beginning, that proactive, like, we're going to play this for fun. Somebody's going to win. It might be you, it might not. Somebody might do something you don't think is right. How do you think you might handle that if that comes up? So a little bit of proactive when you're heading into a situation that can be challenging. Another example is skiing. We, especially last year, they're a lot better this year, but we would say, okay, the big goals for today are to have fun and to communicate calmly and clearly. If we do those things, there are going to be treats, And so it was just about, it's okay if you don't want to ski this run, or it's okay if you want to ski with this parent instead of that parent. Any of that is okay. What's not okay is taking off or screaming at us on the hill, And so just having that up front so it takes a little bit more thought, because sometimes we're just like, I'm so great, I got my kids up to Bachelor and we're going to have a great day. And we don't even think proactively, like, we're all going to be upset by the end of this, or I'm actually taking the time to sit down and play a board game with my kids. I'm so awesome as a parent. So trying to think about proactively knowing your kids and prepping them. Okay, so back to our scenario. Another piece to the regulate could be, if you see that the child might actually be about to, like, flip the game board, just putting your hand on it and just saying something like, we're still playing, I'm not going to let you do that. It's the same thing as if they were about to hit somebody. You would say, I'm not going to let you hit someone. If they, like, it sounds like Alyssa, things calm down pretty quickly, but if they weren't able to calm down quickly, either the family can leave the space for that child, or even better, if that child goes to a different spot and, like John was saying, turns their sign on their door or hugs a stuffy. And then when everyone is back together, okay, we love you, we were having a good time, what happened? Inviting the story, and then reasoning, which is what you did so beautifully, Alyssa, was saying, all of the logic. Is this about having fun? Are we having fun? And then you gave them a beautiful choice of saying, we would love for you to stay and play, but the choice is yours. You don't have to. That's perfect. And then they can sit with that dilemma of, okay, if I choose to stay, I know that things might not go my way, but I really do want to, or I can choose to leave and miss out. So I think that's excellent. Other thoughts or questions about this scenario? Let's see how we're doing on time. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I like the idea of the proactive approach. Maybe even, hey, before we play, why doesn't everybody go grab a stuffy? And then we'll sit down and play and just explain once again. I mean, I kind of go back to, like, I coach soccer and whatnot, and, like, started off being like, hey, which goal are we trying to score in? That one. Which goal are we not trying to score in? That one.
Yes.
Okay, great. So just let's explain what's happening before, but then give them that coping mechanism, before, also in case.
Yep. And, it's a fun opportunity to use humor as well. Like, you could grab your stuffy too, right? Or whatever you're going to use. And you could model ridiculously early in the game something not going in your favor, and just pretend like you're, like, getting upset, and you're going to use your coping skill, and everyone will laugh at you and think it'll be like dad jokes, dad humor, and it'll be great. But you're building a culture that, as a family, we are going to talk about emotions, and we're going to handle them well. We're going to learn to handle them well, including the parents. Yeah. Okay.
This might be another, this might be another workshop, but in our family dynamic, we find that when we give attention to the frustration, the other child sort of feels a little left out. I was doing everything right. Why don't I get that support and attention? You're giving it all to him. Would you say that's fair? I mean, perhaps it's another workshop, but I mean, I realize that in the reasoning part, there is that acknowledgement of, how do you think that affected your sister?
Yes.
Or something.
Totally.
But in that moment, is there an opportunity to is there a benefit in balancing the conversation with the child who's upset versus the child that caused or sparked the frustration?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm, like, shocked at myself right now that I left that out, actually, because usually what we do, and there's kind of like small problems and big problems that, and so when kids have, like, a really big meltdown or rage moment or whatever it is, I'm thinking of that as a big problem, where the adult is the one first on the scene to help regulate and relate and reason. But then we do always bring in if it was with another sibling, we always do bring in that child and let that child say to the one who was upset how they felt and how it affected them. And if it's a smaller problem, then we start there. If it was just like a little thing that doesn't need to be just with the adult for a while, we'll just start right there. So it's very important that the person who was harmed in whatever way it was gets a voice. And just thinking off the cuff, Kelly, like, if your daughter, like, let's say you guys are doing an activity as a family and Grayson has his moment and it takes all of the attention to him, then when you're having that reason conversation and realizing, and your daughter gets to even be the one to say, I was left here. It doesn't seem fair. asking her, like letting Grace ask her, what can I do to make things right? It'd be really interesting to hear what she had to say, whether it's that I have no idea, it might be that she wants to be able to finish that family activity, whatever it was, or it might be that she feels like she needs some special time with just mom or with mom and dad. And so maybe Grayson listens to an audiobook for 10 minutes while you get some time with just her. I don't know, but it would be interesting to hear what she feels like she needs. Yeah. Does that feel right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you're spot on. It's just the attention and I don't know, the dedicated attention, I think.
Totally. Yeah.
Sorry,
and
our
maybe
internet is active.
that's okay. And, maybe it's things like, we're going to, Grayson, you're going to actually go to bed 20 minutes early tonight so we can have some time with your sister. He's going to hate that so much. And she's going to get what she needs, and it's logical. It's not just like I'm randomly punishing you, Yeah. Your eyes are so big right now. You're like, I don't know.
Well, because in fact, we did that last night and our son was hysterical. He's like, that's so unfair. We had to explain, this is the privilege that she deserves because of the behavior that she was showing. And
Right.
you need to go back into your room and go to bed. But you feel like you've just, taken away his puppy. Then it's like he's sad. He's not angry and frustrated. He's just like, but that's not fair, tears. Oh,
and the beautiful thing about that
how to work it
is you can be on his team. You can be like, I am so sad too. I wish you were staying up. I want your company. Let's try again tomorrow night, buddy. I really want to spend time with you. Maybe if you get this extra rest, you'll handle yourself better tomorrow. But tonight, it's not your night. Being on his team, not being like,
I'll call you next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Okay. I'm just aware of the time. So I think rather than doing another scenario, we'll move forward. And I'll just say now that I'm happy to continue the conversation with folks after tonight, if anybody wants to reach out. So we can do more, but okay. I want to ask before we really do this slide, does anyone feel like this is a slide you need? Or is it obvious to you when your child is in control and they're acting or deciding to throw a fit versus when they've really flipped their lid? Would this be helpful or move on?
No, I guess the question that has been coming up for us is like, she sometimes gets out of control because she doesn't get what she wants.
Yeah.
Right. And so like that's the initial, and then it does get out of control. And I'm trying to like reinforce in that reason phase, like, did you get what you wanted through that behavior? And she's able to, well, no, I didn't. Yeah. Exactly. Like, so that once we're in the reason phase, like that's not how, we can get what we want, to communicate clearly and reasonably. But yeah.
But is it ever a question to you of whether she's putting on an act, or is it pretty clear to you?
I think she could really get herself very dysregulated.
Yeah.
Like, and work herself up in her mind of like what's happening, and then all the emotions, and then it's
yeah.
But I do think it's like, her doing that too to herself.
Yeah. Well, I wonder for a case like that, I'm wondering about sort of a scale, like teaching her a scale, maybe making it visual at first, and just like sitting down. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go and create something, but just a blank piece of paper and the numbers 1 through 5, and then together come up with some language, or even a little smiley face type thing. So like a 1 being I'm calm and in control, all the way to a 5 being I've totally lost control. I'm really upset. And then figuring out what 2, 3, and 4 would be. And then start using that throughout the day when she's calm or when she's just a little bit upset. And you can just do it on your fingers. That way it's always with you. Like, where are you at right now? Are you like a 1? Are you kind of getting into a 2? Like, you know, and so she can start learning to identify her own level of escalation and emotions. And then that can serve you, because it sounds like you can see it building. So you can start having some conversations around like, okay, so when you're at a 2, what are we going to try to bring you back down to a 1 when you're at a 3? And that way you're, again, being proactive. She's on board with, and again, you can pull from these regulate strategies, like what would appeal to you when you're starting to get agitated. So some of that can be proactively, but then when the moment has come and she's starting to get worked up, you can say, you look like you've moved on to a 3 or a 4. Am I, you know, I want to intervene and tell you before you lose it, this is probably a good time to use one of your strategies. Or this is, you know, does that make sense? Yeah. So part of it can be that she owns it. And so when she's just like at a 1 or 2, you can ask her, where are you right now? What direction are you heading? And what can you do? And then when she's not making good choices, then you can kind of take ownership and say, you seem to be at a 3 or a 4. I'm about to take some action here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that would be useful for you guys.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes it escalates quicker than that.
Yeah.
To be able to identify. Sometimes it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And then you're just like right there to like, we need to regulate. And yeah. Okay. Well, I think I didn't hear any loud yeses. Let's talk about this. So I'll move on. Because I think this is really helpful. Developing your child's upstairs brain when they are calm. So I'm going to give you, this is on your handout, just the bullet point part. And there are, I'm trying to remember, I think there might be 5. And for each one, I'm going to give you several examples. I gave you space to write, so you can jot down any of these examples that you like. So decision-making helps kids develop their upstairs brain. So for a young child, letting them choose their clothes or shoes for the day. For children who are old enough that they have homework, what time do you think you'd want to do your homework today? Giving them a little bit of control and decision-making, like what part of the afternoon or evening are they going to miss out on to get that homework done? Are they happy with their choice? Before bedtime, I can see you're really into what you're doing. You can keep doing that for 10 more minutes, or you can stop now and we'll have time to read together. Your choice. Just little simple opportunities for decision-making that has, you know, not a terrible consequence, but a consequence that they can live with and think about, like, am I happy with that? I give my kids a checklist and for like their daily responsibilities, but they manage the checklist when they do it and they check it off themselves. A scheduling conflict, letting them choose between 2 events that they would really like to attend, but they're scheduled at the same time. So just opportunities for making choices. Oh, and there was one last one, allowance. That's a good one on an ongoing way. It's a dilemma of how they're going to spend that money or save it. So that's more decision making. Okay, so practicing calming strategies proactively. So deep breathing or meditation. A really great time to do that. A couple of great times. One is the transition from school to home, or the getting ready for bed time. Going for walks regularly, cuddling with an animal. Oh, yeah. Another good time for practicing this is before an event that will be challenging. Like, you know what? Sometimes you get really worked up at your soccer game. We're going to just go for a walk before we even head there. That kind of idea. Self-understanding, helping your child develop their brain by reflecting. Why did you choose to do that? Or what made you make that choice? How do you think you'll handle it if this comes up? how will you feel if you make this choice? How will you feel about that? Are you going to be happy with that choice? Helping them stop and think. If blank happens, what's something you can do? If so-and-so takes the ball again at recess, what's something you can do? It's really great too, to be able to kind of piggyback on the language that the school is using. So my boys are both familiar with walk and talk, which is like they walk away from the situation and talk to an adult. So that's something that they know. So if I ask them this, if this happens, what's something you can do? Sometimes they'll say, I can walk and talk. Great.
It looks, may I ask a question? Sorry, I'm chirping. The self-understanding bit, those are open-ended questions. Joe and I were just having a quick conversation. He's constantly, is this a good choice or not a good choice? You know, and it's like they'll answer it, but then we don't talk about it. So I'm guessing that there's a lot of value in the open-ended questions. So it gives them more opportunity to like think through the process. Is that what I'm picking up?
Yeah, because this part, the being proactive part, it's really, we're literally forming the brain. We're forming neural pathways. And so if they can have to articulate the why, then that helps that to become more effective. Right. So
Okay.
It can just be like, I love that you asked that already. Is this a good choice or not so good choice? And they say, not so good choice. Then you could say, okay, what would be a better choice? Or, okay, tell me, share with me your thinking. What makes that a good choice? What makes that not a good choice? So it could just be a follow-up question. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Easy.
Empathy. Why do you think that baby is crying at the park? If you keep that Frisbee that you found, how will the other child feel if he comes back for it and it isn't here? And I know this is one that we probably all do. But I just, so you can pat yourself on the back and say, yay, we are doing that. We are building our child's, helping them build their brain. This is a great one, I think, but leaving the store, that woman wasn't very nice to us, was she? Do you think something might have happened to her that made her feel sad today? So when we are with our kid and there's like a uncomfortable interaction that happens, not pretending like it didn't happen, but kind of opening that up a little bit to talk about together. Okay. All right, so this one is also fun. Morality, hypothetical questions to help them wrestle with and develop morality. Would it be okay to run a red light if there was an emergency? I had been preparing for this workshop, and so this one was on my mind, and we actually talked about this over lunch on Sunday, I think it was, and it just turned into this great conversation about like, what kind of emergency, and would you just drive through the red light as fast as you could, or what could happen then? And just, they were thinking about all the possibilities. You could just really see the wheels turning, and they were like, they didn't feel like they were being lectured or this wasn't a training moment. It was just like, what would you do? Or would this be okay? If a bully was picking on someone at school and there were no adults around, what would you do? That's another. So just any hypotheticals that you can think of that are age appropriate, give them a chance to wrestle in their brains. Okay, I know I'm going kind of fast. I feel like this part is a little bit more me just giving you ideas and a little less of you coming up with a plan. Hope that's okay. This one is also, this kind of does two things, teaching your child about his or her brain. The teaching and learning helps develop their brain, and then it gives you a tool to use with them about their big emotions. So I know that this is hard to read, and I can send you the slides. I just enlarged it and it got fuzzy. But when we do this, we call this a hand model of the brain. So you can have your child do this, make a fist, and you can tell them that the upstairs, the fingers, is their thinking part of the brain, where they can reason and make good decisions and really think before they act and do the right thing. Then have them lift their fingers a little bit, and the thumb is part of the downstairs brain, and you can teach them that this is where their big feelings come from, which is good because that's, where you can share your feelings of love, but it also is where feelings like anger and frustration come from. And then, of course, let them know there's nothing wrong with feeling upset, but we want to learn to handle our emotions. So have them close their fingers again. And then you just say something like, see how the upstairs thinking part of your brain is touching your thumb. So it can help using the upstairs part of your brain can help your downstairs brain share what you're feeling, but do it calmly. We want them to work together. But then we explain like this flipping your lid part. When we get really upset, we totally flip our lid, and the upstairs brain is gone in the sense that it's no longer touching the downstairs part of our brain. So it can't help us. It can't help us to stay calm. And so then you can, once they kind of understand in general this upstairs, downstairs part, then you can teach them that this can be a reminder when they're getting upset. This can be a small tool they can use to say, okay, I'm going to try to use my upstairs brain. I'm going to hug my downstairs brain. I'm going to try to use that part of my brain to calm down. And I think that has mixed results, but as they get older, they'll be able to understand that more and use that to their advantage more and more. Okay, how are we doing on time? We have just a few minutes. So I'm going to just apologize and fire hose for like 2 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about, where you're at now compared to where we started and what else you might need to move forward with your plan. So, okay, so this next couple slides comes from Brené Brown has an audio book. It's only available on audio, and it's The Gifts of Imperfect Parenting. So she references this longitudinal study of fifth graders where they were looking at whether the fifth graders were using shame self-talk or guilt self-talk. So when a student had struck out at a baseball game or gotten in trouble at school, guilt self-talk would be saying, I didn't do well on this, or I made a bad choice. And shame self-talk would be going to the place of I am not enough. I'm stupid. I'm bad. And so the researchers were able to measure whether these kids were more prone to using guilt talk or shame talk. Now, here's why any of this matters. In high school, the shame-prone kids were more likely to attempt suicide, drop out of high school, engage in high-risk behaviors. Whereas the guilt-prone kids were more likely to finish high school, apply for college, engage in community activities, and engage in lower-risk behaviors. There's a huge difference when we say to our kids, I love who you are, but these behaviors are not acceptable. And we all know that, but we were probably raised by parents who didn't know this. And so we may have been brought up with some shame language when we were kids, because shame works. Children experience shame as the threat of being unlovable. Isn't that just crushing? So it's a little bit easier to turn around a child's behavior when you use shame because it's so terrifying to them. It's so threatening to them. But when we know how important it is that, for example, a belief in this again is coming from Brené Brown, a belief in one's worthiness is the difference between adults who feel a deep sense of love and belonging and those who do not. So worthiness is that idea of the difference between shame and guilt. I did something that wasn't such a wise choice, or I am bad. I'm worthy or I'm not. And so we have to remember that love and belonging can't be on the table when our kids are in struggle. So just a little food for thought. What prerequisites for worthiness are we knowingly or unknowingly handing down to our children? So as it relates to our topic for tonight with kids flipping their lids, having meltdowns, are we unintentionally implying to them that they are not lovable because they behave so badly, because they can't control themselves? So just remember, our kids are often doing the best they can with the brain they have, and we are usually doing the best we can as parents. So this applies to us. I'll connect these dots in a second. Let me just share with you these quotes. Who we are is a much more accurate predictor of how our kids will do than what we know about parenting. And what we are teaches the child more than what we say. So we must be what we want our children to become. So if we tell our kids, oh, you spilled the milk, and our kid, is like, oh, I'm so stupid. And we say, no, you're not stupid. You just spilled the milk. We all have accidents. And then an hour later, we're burning the chicken and we're like, I'm such an idiot. I burned the chicken. If we shame ourselves in front of our kids, but we tell them, you're not a bad person, which sends a stronger message, right? So the modeling of how we talk to ourselves and treat ourselves has a huge impact on our kids' internalizing of a shame mentality or a guilt mentality. Guilt is actually helpful. It teaches us that I did something wrong. Okay. So after that heavy part, I'm going to tell you that you're doing great. You really are. I love this graphic because we all have all these questions, like I'm supposed to be doing better. And I love that in this, the child is just simply like, I love her. Children have an easy time being present with us. And they love us. So you are doing a great job. I want to encourage you and give you permission to take care of yourself so you can show up for your kid in the way you want to. And when you do inevitably mishandle a situation, model to them the way you would want them to handle making amends. It's okay to say, I messed up. It's okay to be vulnerable with them. It's okay to say, I'm sorry. How can I make this right to you? And then lastly, when everyone needs a break, just a bit of sage advice, put them in water or take them outside. This doesn't really relate to like the explosive moment necessarily, but just when you need a break, when people are getting the grumpies. I had an adult friend recently say to me, she's like, this works for me 98% of the time. Getting outside or being in the water. Okay. So let's see. Gosh, it's 8 o'clock. I want to ask you these questions, but I want to honor your time. So maybe what I'll do instead is just leave them there with you for a moment. You can think about them. You can jot them down and talk about them with a friend or with your spouse. What are you taking away from this conversation? Really to kind of solidify that and make it concrete for yourself. And then these 4 questions at the bottom will help you. Like, the downside of a workshop is that it's mostly me talking and it can seem really great in the moment, but then it can kind of vanish. So for you, it can kind of just float away. What else do you need in order to move forward with your plan? Who needs to be part of this with you? How will you know you've been successful? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to actually implement something? If you notice to yourself, you're like, I am probably only at like a 6 or a 7, what would you need to make it a 9 or a 10? So trying to actually go from workshop to action. These are the resources I referenced. The Whole Brain Child, The Gifts of Imperfect Parenting. Oh, I didn't reference Nurture the Wow, but it's my favorite book for like, not about a how-to, but a validation of the transformative experience of being a parent and what it does to and for us, good and bad. I love the subtitle, Finding Spirituality in the Frustration, Boredom, Tears, Poop, Desperation, Wonder, and Radical Amazement of Parenting. Okay. I'll just also remind you guys that I am a coach. And so I love working with folks individually. Coaching is all about movement and growth. And so that looks like me partnering with clients to establish a goal that really gets at the heart of the desire of the change that you desire And then helping you make action plans, smart action plans that think about obstacles, that think about the support you need so that you actually can achieve your goals. And I do specialize in family development, which means I support parents in their personal development, which might be stress and anxiety management or work-life balance or any number of things, and support parents in their actual parenting with workshops like tonight. I also love talking about executive functioning, like attention and time management and those kind of issues. And I also really love talking about developing routines and systems for families that help life to run smoothly and help you to foster a happy household and positive relationships. So if any of that sounds like it would be helpful to you, I do offer a free 30-minute consultation to kind of get more of a sense of what coaching is and if I would be a good fit for you. So my passion really is to help families thrive by supporting parents. So if you decided to book coaching with me, for tonight, I'll put the cost of the registration toward your coaching session. So you can just keep that in mind if that would seem helpful. All right, let me stop sharing finally. Sorry, we went a few minutes over, and sorry that the end was a bit of fire hose. Yeah, I really wanted to hear from you. Maybe we could take 1 minute and just do a really quick, what is the most important, valuable thing you're taking away from tonight? And then we'll close. Who wants to start?
I will. Just to remind myself to not react immediately and work on the 3 R's, because it's always something I've told myself, I want to do that, but then it never happens. So just making a conscious effort to actually implement those.
Yeah, good. And since you said that you've wanted to work on it before, but it hasn't happened, I would really encourage you to, like, sometime in the next 24 hours, take those questions seriously about, like, okay, what is actually going to help you move to action this time? Who do you need on board? What do you need to do to implement it? Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Alyssa. Who else?
Thank you.
I'll go. Yeah, I think just the not trying to rush through like the regulation of, let's just park this until you can calm down, and just a number of ideas for different ways for him to regulate, and how to have better conversations when he's not having a meltdown, to try and give the skills to him so he can try and help himself.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. We've got 2 more.
For me, I think it's really to focus on that middle R, that relate. In the middle, I tend to like go from regulate, like once you're regulated, like let's reason and talk about it. And so to spend some more time in that middle piece, really connecting and listening. There.
Nice. Yeah. Kelly or Joe?
Mine would be to stay calm, and it's okay for us to walk away when we're frustrated and not keep ourselves in the situation, even if it's just walk around the house for 30 seconds to take ourselves out of it. Would be the main one. And I think I like the, explain what we're doing before, when we know there's potential for somebody to get upset in an activity.
Yeah.
Jumping on playing golf, blah, 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 whatever.
Awesome.
For me, I think, as Emily shared, the relate piece, validating the feelings and empathizing with them. I think for me, the aha moment was that their brain is so not yet developed that they physically aren't capable of having that logic. And I think, I was just telling my girlfriend about it, and I said, I give the kids so much credit because they're so smart and they are mature in so many ways, but in this sort of basic function that you think everybody, I mean, the world is a silly place, but you give so much credit. And I think for me, it was just kind of like realizing they are 5 and 8 and they are kids, and we have so much more happening So we want them to understand straight away and to be patient, asking the questions as well for the reason bit. So.
Yeah, knowing that can really help us adjust our expectations, right? Like we can't expect them to be using their upstairs brain all the time, and that takes a load off. Yeah. Okay, well, again, I'm sorry we went a few minutes over, but thank you all so much for being here and for all your time. I will email you tomorrow just a little brief feedback questionnaire to keep learning how I can make these more on target and useful for folks. But thank you again, and I'll see you guys around.
One more quick question. Can we get a link to the video since you recorded it? Is that
I was
possible?
going to ask the same thing to share with my husband.
You got it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, Amanda.
Bye.